Hey there, and welcome to your very first beginner watercolor lesson. I'm Libby, and I'm so excited to have you here. Watercolor is such a beautiful and relaxing art form, and I can't wait to help you get started. Before we jump into painting, we need to cover the basics, your supplies. So in this lesson, I'll walk you through everything you need, and by the end, we'll even create a fun little project together to put your new skills into practice. Go ahead and gather whatever supplies you have on hand. Everything I'm using is linked below, but don't worry if you don't have the exact same materials. Just keep in mind that the quality of your supplies can make a difference in your painting experience. Having good quality materials can really boost your confidence as you learn and grow as an artist. I've also put together a full list of my recommended supplies, including budget-friendly options if you're not quite ready to invest in artist-grade materials. You can find that link below as well. Let's start with watercolor paper. There are two main types. There's cold press paper, this one is my personal favorite, and hot press paper. Here you can see the difference between them side by side. Hot press paper is smoother and can be better for detailed work, but it's really a matter of preference. Cold press paper has a slight texture, making it great for soft blends and holding pigment well. Watercolor paper also comes in different weights. 140-pound paper is the most common, and it's perfect for beginners because it holds water really well. Anything lighter will buckle more, and anything heavier can be a bit pricey. So I recommend starting with a good 140-pound cold pressed watercolor paper. Next, we're going to talk about brushes. You don't need a huge collection to start, just a few key brushes is enough. A round brush, size 6 or 8 is great for most painting techniques. I use these a lot in my watercolor portraits. I also use a size 10 round for larger brush strokes. With a round brush, you can create thin lines, thick strokes, and blending all with one brush. So watch how this one brush, a size 6 round brush, can be used for all three techniques. Grab a piece of paper, a size 6 or 8 round brush, and pause the video while you try these techniques on your own. Using the very tip of the brush with light pressure, you can create a very thin line. With that same brush, get a little bit more water and a little more paint, and now drag the side of the brush across the paper. Using the side of the brush again, you can carefully sweep your brush up and down to blend the paint across the paper. Grab a little more water or paint as needed, and pause the video and practice these techniques a few times to get familiar with how it works. A flat brush is perfect for washes and covering large areas. So dip your brush in the water and wet the paper first. Then get a little paint and water on your brush and drag it over the wet paper to create a nice soft wash. A detail brush, size 2 or smaller, helps with fine lines and small details. You can draw fine lines right over the top of your dry layers, or you can create really fine lines and details. This is what I use to create individual hairs on the final layer of a pet portrait. It's always important to make sure that your previous layers have dried completely. Make sure your brushes are labeled for watercolor since other types might not hold water properly. So go ahead and pause the video and take some time to practice each one of these techniques with your brushes. It takes a little practice to get the consistency of water and paint just right. So see how each one behaves with a little bit of water and paint. Now for the fun part, our paints. Watercolors come in two main forms. You have pan watercolors. These are dry and compact, perfect for travel and easy use. Just add water to activate them. And then you also have tube watercolors. These are more concentrated and vibrant, but require squeezing out onto a palette. Both work really well. I personally prefer the tube watercolors because if you have a palette with empty wells, you can accomplish the same thing by loading up the wells and letting them dry. Before we start painting, let's set up our palette. If you're using pan colors, you would just wet them slightly before painting. If using tubes, you squeeze out a little paint and mix with water in one of the palette wells. One of the biggest watercolor skills is controlling water. So here's a simple way to check. If you have too much water, the color will be very light and flow everywhere. Too little water, the brush will feel dry and the strokes will look really scratchy. The perfect balance is a smooth flowing stroke that's rich in color but not puddling. Now that we've covered the basics, let's make something fun. A watercolor swatch bookmark. So this is a great way to get comfortable with your brushes, paint, and water control while creating something useful. So the first thing that we're going to do is tape down a strip of watercolor paper to a flat surface. This will keep it from warping. The size that I'm using here is 2 inches by 6 inches. Next, we're going to mark 1-inch marks along the sides of the paper, and just make sure you're marking on the tape and not the paper itself. The next step is to take your ruler and just lightly draw a line across the paper. You don't want it to be a dark line because you don't want it to show through your watercolor paint. Now it's time for the paint. You can choose any color you want. You can choose even up to 6 and do each section a different color. I'm choosing to do one color, and then each section is going to get lighter as we go down. I'm mixing an ultramarine blue and a blue-green to get this really nice, vibrant teal color. So you want it to be a good milky consistency, not too much water, not too much paint. And then you're just going to go right into that top section and fill it in. For the next section, if you're choosing to use a different color, go ahead and get your color ready for this next section. And if you're doing the same color and going lighter like I am, you just dip your brush into the water, just the very tip of your brush, and then tap it on the paper towel to get some of the pigment off of your brush. And then you're just going to go in um, with the paint, and you want to leave kind of a gap on the top so that the colors don't bleed together. And then the next section, you're going to do the same thing. Dip the tip of your brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel, and then you'll see that the colors will get lighter as you go down. And just again, remember to leave that gap at the top if you don't want your colors to bleed together. After you've let it dry completely, it's time to take off the tape. So you're going to peel back each piece one at a time as slowly as you can to not rip the paper. If you're using high quality paper like Arch's cold press 140-pound paper like I am, the tape should not rip your paper. For the final steps in your bookmark, you can add a ribbon to the top if you would like. Just take a hole punch and punch a hole in the top. And then I'm using an 8-inch piece of ribbon. You can use any kind of ribbon you want. For the final touches on your bookmark, you can get a waterproof pen and you can do anything you want with your bookmark. You can do the same design that I'm doing. I'm just adding some simple flowers, but you could also write a nice message. This is your project, so feel free to do whatever you would like with it. And that's it, your very first watercolor project. This bookmark is not only a fun way to practice, but it's also something you can use daily and even gift to a friend. In the next lesson, we'll start working on basic watercolor techniques like washes and blending. So keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.